Welcome to the Dr. Dionne Show, where real conversations about diversity matter. I'm an educator and consultant specializing in diversity and inclusion. In this show, I interview top experts and people like you and me, highlighting issues like race, gender, and disability. I'm here to create change, expand your understanding of what diversity means, and to continue the mission toward equality so that everyone has a fair shake. This show is not for the faint of heart, so put on your big girl and big boy pants and ride along. Hello and welcome to the Dr. Dionne Show. I am so thrilled. I have a wonderful guest with me today. His name is Professor Sweis. He is Associate Professor of Philosophy at City Colleges of Chicago. He's also head of an organization or a ministry called Logically Faithful. Thanks for coming today.
It is a pleasure. It is a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Great. So let's start off by what is Logically Faithful? What is your ministry about?
Well, Logically Faithful is designed to help the believer to think and find hope through suffering, specifically through the most difficult periods of people's lives, using the profound evidence we have for our faith in Christ. It's helping the thinker to think deeper and a skeptic to think and to believe.
Okay, that's very deep. I have to unpack that for a second. Sure. So you mentioned a believer. Let's start with what is the definition of a believer?
The believer is one who had given their life over to God or finds substance in the spiritual or the transcendent. And of course, I'm rooting that in the Christian tradition, but all others are more than welcome. And that's a believer, not just an advocate. So when I say believer, I don't mean it in a general parochial sense or the sophomoric sense. I mean it into the deep sense. One that finds significance for their life in that belief, rather than like I believe that there's a Eiffel Tower in Paris. Okay, great, but that doesn't alter my life. But if I believe in, as opposed to trust in my doctor who prescribes a life-changing medication, that's a difference. And that's the type of doctrine I'm speaking about regarding belief in God.
Okay, so I like to really look at the choice of language that people use. Mm-hmm. And I'm interested that you said the words, people are welcome to come, which implies that you're leading the way or your belief is leading the way. Can you expand on that? Are you saying that Christianity is kind of the way and others are kind of going in the same direction behind? I'm just trying to figure out.
Sure. There are myriad different opinions in our pluralistic culture of different belief systems, truth systems, points of view, and opinions, and everybody and their mother has a different religion.
Yes.
So the key is how do you determine which one is right and which one's wrong and which one is actually solidly based in history, fact, and evidence? Mm-hmm. That's an important question you asked, Dr. Polton. It's a profound question, and it impacts the deepest part of what it means to be human and to find out significance and meaning in our lives. So when I say I follow Christianity, not Christianity proper per se, but Jesus. I think the life and the work, the death and resurrection of Jesus is something not to be ignored by anyone, no matter what their religious or faith background is. I think the evidence for that is absolutely amazing once you look into it and start unpacking it.
Let's talk about that. What kind of evidence are you referring to?
Well, I'm referring, if you were to look at the large scope of human history, and you were to see which organization or which people group or which person has done more good for the history of the human race, Jesus always comes out on top. In almost every area, whether you're talking about art, technology, medicine, it's the people who gave their lives to Christ who have impacted the world in profoundly remarkable ways. I'm here at an educational institution in the West. And the educational institutions in the West are foundational for the creation of educational aspects of life. And that was primarily done by missionaries who founded the Ivy League schools like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Oxford, Cambridge, across the board. And they begin to spread like wildfire across the area. And it's with the Reformation of Martin Luther, which just occurred tail end of last year, shows us that questioning our belief system, questioning who we are, and not giving in to what the authorities say is foundational point that Jesus himself was pointing out to people to say, come to accept me, my door. I knock at the door. Anyone who's willing and able can open that door and their life can be transformed. Okay. Not just in the area of education, you could talk about other fields as well. So when Jesus spoke, he didn't just give out great mantras and great poetry. He also did miracles to back that up. There's historical evidence that substantiates that.
So there are also people who believe in Buddha, who believe in Prophet Muhammad. They believe in different other religions, and they also believe they are believers and going in the right direction. How do you? What is your analysis of that? I'm of the belief, and it may be too simplistic to believe this, but I really think that no one really knows who or what God is. Is he a he actually, or is he a she? Mm-hmm. Is it a person? How does that person look? We've seen different images of who God is supposed to be and who Jesus is supposed to be. So I would love to hear your thoughts on your belief about how other people are also worshiping the same entity. So whether you're looking at whether it's Buddha, whether you call it something different, I think everyone's pretty much. If you believe in something higher, that you're also you're basically preaching to the same thing. Would that be correct?
The question you're posing and the analysis you're giving is profound, because the implications of it are life-changing. Okay, so to answer it this way, so I used to do some work with American Airlines, and people would check in and they give their passports indicating the city they need to go to. One gentleman came up to me one day and asked to go to Liberia. So I checked the database, an international database of passports with visas, and I told him, sir, I need a visa from you because you're holding an American passport. He told me I don't need a visa. I said, you do. He said, I don't. I said, you do. He said, you don't. We went back and forth. He told me I go there every month. I'm a businessman. I don't. I said, well, sir, my computer says that if you're holding an American passport and you're going to the country of Liberia, you need a visa. He said, I'm not going to the country of Liberia. I'm going to Liberia and Costa Rica, which is South America. He doesn't need a visa for it. I said, wow, it's good you clarified that. Because although we were referring to the same wording, we were actually talking about a different entity, a different referent point. So when I say God, and a Muslim says God, when a Buddhist says God, they're not referring to the same thing, although we're using similar terminology. Mm-hmm. Sounds like we are, but we're really not. And that applies to many fields, whether you talk about justice, racism, woman, sex, politics, whatever the field is. That's why it's so important to question the presuppositions and question the people who ask us, what do you mean when you say that? So with that said, although many religions use the same terms, they're actually referring to different points in that. For example, I come from the Middle East. My family is heavily entrenched in that culture. And the vast majority of people identify as Muslim, one or another. My family and others, we are a small minority in the Middle East who identify as Christians. Okay. But that identity, of course, has to be taken on as an individual level as you mature.
And it's from Jordan you're from, right? Correct?
That's correct.
Yes, okay.
Right next to Iraq and Iran, and the most peaceful regions on earth, right? Mm-hmm. Actually, more peaceful than some of the places on the south side of Chicago, but I digress. The area there that we're discussing is the question of truth in religions. So when a Muslim says, I believe in Jesus, he's referring to a prophet, nothing more. When a Christian says, I believe in Jesus, he's referring to the Son of the living God manifest on earth. And for a Muslim, that's blasphemy. Actually, it's called shirk. It's one of the highest, most degrading sins that could send you straight to hell, if you believe that. So although they say the same words, they're not referring to the same thing. Neither are we referring to the same thing when we talk about heaven or women's rights or equality. We both shout out the same mantras. Oh, we both believe in women's rights and women's rights. But do we? What do you mean by women's rights? What do you mean by racism? And when you start unpacking that, you see the differences are profound.
And that is the beauty of diversity, that people think differently. People are entitled, luckily in this country and Canada and other places, that you can practice religious freedom and you can think differently. What I've encountered, however, is when people attach, I guess, worth to some religions over others. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. So I lived in the South for quite some time, and I was criticized quite a bit for not going to church every Sunday. Mm-hmm. I'm of the belief that because I don't go to church every Sunday does not mean that I'm less godly than anybody else. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I had witnessed many people who went to church every Sunday and Wednesday And their behavior, if we're going by behavior, I was Mother Teresa compared to them. So I just, I think the beautiful thing is that we can have our own truths, and we can have our own beliefs. I think we can get into trouble, however, when we impose on other people or make other people feel bad because they don't necessarily ascribe to someone's way of thinking or someone's way of believing. And I think it's a very personal thing. Mm-hmm. Would you not agree? It
is a very personal thing, but it's also a personal thing that has public ramifications across the board, especially if the person speaking about it is somebody of leadership, whether they're political or religious, ideological, and things of that nature. Regarding the issue of truth, we talk about this in almost every semester in our courses, where you have a group of people who try to impose their own versions of their belief system of reality upon everyone else. And if you don't walk the line and toe the line, we'll cut you out, we'll silence you. And in some cases, people are killed for it. And sadly, human history is riddled with that. However, the line has shifted, Dr. Poulton. Right now, the people in the authority figures in culture are secular liberals, whereas in the past it was religious fundamentalists who would not allow the secular liberals to have their say. Now the tides have shifted. Those in the area of power will not allow the other side to speak.
You think so?
I found that in many cases where people are stymied in their communication. For example, many areas in the academy, for example, where I teach, I've had debates on different topics, whether it's global warming, racism, religions. But when I had one on homosexuality, wow, you should have seen the vitriol. My secular progressive friends at the college passed out petitions to shut down the event and possibly get me fired just for debating the topic of whether homosexuality is an ethical practice given the current climate of the day, whether it's carried on from the past or whether it's biological, etc. All we were doing is debating it at a college, for goodness sake. And they didn't even want to have the debate.
Well, because I think that's yeah, I can understand that given that it's the possibility of offending is very high,
right?
And if you don't have the right person facilitating, it can become like it can be the worst thing ever. But I agree with you that I think anything can be debated and discussed especially on a college campus. Where else does that not happen?
Where else are you going to do it?
Yes, yes.
And the issue of truth you bring up, I mean, people will say there is no truth in life. Everyone can believe whatever they want or smoke what they want, whether it's legal or not. Doesn't matter. Do what you want. Well, here's the problem: they actually believe that to be true.
Okay, so let's. So
they say there's no truth, but at the same time, they believe that what they're saying is actually true. It's a self-contradiction, what we call in philosophy, cutting your own throat, or sort of contradictory statement. It's like saying I can't speak English.
Okay, so so I'm looking at over your shoulder. It says the Time. Is that a real Time magazine cover? I don't think I've seen that.
Yes, it is. On May 2017.
Okay, so is truth dead? Mm-hmm. That's a deep question because everybody has their own truths.
I say people have their versions of truth, but they don't have their own truth. I can't suddenly say that it's true for me that I have hair. No matter how much I believe it, it's not going to happen just because I believe it. I don't have. Do you
shave your hair?
I do, but not.
Okay, so that means hold on. So that means you have hair, but you're choosing not to display it.
Well, I wish I could display more than this there.
What I'm getting at is people have experiences, and especially in my work doing diversity work, and I find it extremely important to meet people where they are. And so whether you are you've been raised to practice bigotry, to be closed-minded towards different people, I meet you where you are because I think that people are operating under their own truths, and they've been taught a certain thing, and moreover, if they've had experiences that actually support what they already believe or what their truth is, then what do you do? So that's how you begin to kind of to work with people. So when you say that someone has their own version of the truth, it's who owns the truth?
Well, the problem is that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Who owns the truth? All people ask me constantly in my ethics classes when we get into issues, debates on questions of abortion, euthanasia, terrorism, and control within the NSA monitoring our electronic devices, etc. They say, well, who's to say that A is wrong or B is wrong? Who's to say? That's not the question we
Good
should
question.
be asking, unless the answer is actually God, right? Say, well, God. Well, other than God as a reference point, the answer to the question, I think the best answer I found is the one with the best evidence. That's who's to say. If you have evidence behind your position, if you're able to articulate it in a way that's understandable and persuasive, you can get a lot done. You can reach a lot more people. But I don't think we can go to the extreme to say there is no truth and people just make up their own. Otherwise, you'll have people saying, like, for example, I'm a woman because I'm not a woman. I'm a man here right now. I could just say what I want. I'm president of Uganda and I have 4 wives. Well, I don't have 4 wives. I'm not president of Uganda. Just because I say it and believe it doesn't make it so.
Oh no, and I firmly, I'm in no way am I suggesting that we just throw away, you know, what truth is. Truth is truth. There are truths, definite things that, you know, like you are wearing a blue jacket. I'm wearing a red jacket. You're wearing glasses. So there are things that are in terms of their accuracy. I think it's non-negotiable. But I'm more or less speaking more to people's beliefs and their experiences that shape their truths and
shape their lives too.
And shape their lives, exactly. Yeah. And on the other side of that, I will also in devil's advocate to what I'm saying too is that sometimes people also have had experiences that make them believe that. So, for example, let's say someone has experienced really, really bad things with one group of people. So right. They would then believe that all those people in that particular group act a certain way because that becomes their truth.
Stereotypes.
So,
right. Mm-hmm.
That's definitely that's an example. So, but sometimes, you know, or eventually they will encounter something that kind of contradicts what they're already thinking, and then that way that starts the beginning of shifting their thinking of their truth that they've had at that very moment.
Right.
So I'm not disputing, like science, for example. We've talked about science in the past. Can you explain that? So science is you can't deny science.
No. Well, science is full of philosophy behind the sciences, for example. The ones references you talked about with people, like some of my own students tell me of cases of where they've been harassed because of the color of their skin or because of their race. And a lot of times, sometimes I've come from a conservative background, which tells me all these people may be playing a race card or a sex card or whatever you call it. And the term itself is just, I know you told me it's full of,
okay, hold on.
It's pregnant with meaning, isn't it?
I can't stand that term, race card. I'm sorry. Yeah. When people say race card, that automatically just it minimizes the person's experience. In my belief,
right?
It says, oh, you're just playing the race cards. It's dismissive, and which is not fair, because if that's somebody's experience, let's go back to the truth. If that's somebody's experience, then who are you or who am I to tell them that their experience is not correct? And moreover, if you don't live in the same skin, and I happen to live in the same skin, people of color know. They know when they're being treated improperly because of their race. So that race card thing, it actually gets me going, as you can see.
That's one of the reasons I brought it up. If you mind if I throw the question back at you.
No problem.
What would be a proper response to somebody who throws the question when somebody explains their experience of going through a racially fiery situation, and the standard response is, oh, that's just you just saying that because you're black, or you're saying that because you're this background, etc. It's just a race card. What would be a proper way to address that kind of terminology nowadays?
I think like if in any situation where anybody's encountered any situation where they've been mistreated or they've been made to feel bad, you be empathetic and you say, you know, I'm sorry you went through that, and listen. Just sometimes people just want to hear. They want somebody to hear what they're saying and to validate their experience. You don't necessarily have to agree with it, but you can just listen and validate it. And again, I actually in my book I analogize this to a pregnancy. So I've had 2 children. Have you ever had a child? I don't think so, right?
Well, through my wife, yeah.
Through your wife, but I'm saying as a woman,
of course.
So you will never know what it's like to give birth. I can tell you what it's like. I can be descriptive as much as possible, but you will never have that experience of giving birth. So it's the same kind of situation that the lens in which we should look through is to be empathetic and to understand, you know what, as much as I can understand how that person feels, I empathize with that person and understand that you could never fully understand how that person is feeling and what they go through. So.
Right. Okay. I see what you mean. And when I say that is as a professor, and you've been teaching too, some of my students have claimed that I was racist when they get an F, and I've had that term thrown at me more than once. So what? On what grounds? One student was actually caught cheating, and they had witnesses in the class, and apparently I'm racist because I gave him an F. So those types of things are minimize the actual legitimate claims of racism that come out throughout culture.
That is true.
And going back to that biblical issue, and what the scriptures talk about this, that talk about in the very first book of the very first page of the very first chapter of the Bible, it says there that all men, that God specifically made all people, male and female, he made in the image of God. He didn't restrict it to race, to creed, to societal references or ideology.
That's right.
No, all people, including women, are made in the image of God. And it wasn't until later that we started to fracture each other and divide each other based on groups and ideologies and race and color. And I think it's a social construction that has been detrimental throughout history and to the lives, and the history is riddled in blood with this type of ideology. And the more we address it, the better we get at it. And I think throughout history, we've gotten better at it, although we have a long way to go. We have a long way to go. And one of the things you mentioned is being empathetic and listening opens the door. And I think the modern climate now with the Me Too movement has allowed, because people are actually listening to the victims, more are able to come forward rather than stymied and pushed back.
Absolutely.
And that climate of openness, being able to embrace the victim rather than make the victim the perpetrator, changes everything.
Definitely. And it's long overdue. And as a woman and as a mom of two girls, absolutely. I'm happy this is happening, and it's been a very instructive and teachable time for my children. We've sat down and we watched all the reports, especially with that horrible doctor, and even some instances where some parents didn't actually necessarily believe their children. It's very difficult. It's very difficult, and that's why I always tell my kids, you know what, you can come tell me anything. You're not at fault. You let me know. That's wonderful. And their instincts mean something. If you think something is wrong, it's wrong.
Yeah, there's something there. It has to be addressed. And it goes back, let me draw this back to our earlier discussion regarding truth. It is true that sexual predators should be addressed justly. It is true that racism is wrong. It is true that rape should not be tolerated. That's not just my truth. I think that's a fundamental truth of human nature. No matter what I think personally about it, I think it's true beyond what I said. And this goes back to Martin Luther King's wonderful paper, I think one of the greatest letters ever written, called The Letter from Birmingham Prison or Jail, where he argued in a very profound fashion with his own pen, using scraps of paper, that there are some laws. Laws are things we should follow and obey if they are just. But in the same token, if a law is unjust, we are morally obligated to disobey it. Why? Because there's a fundamental truth to human nature. And one of those truths is the equality, or the treatment of equality of all men, women, and children, regardless of creed, race, or background. Because we are made in the image of God, which is actually in the foundational documents of the Declaration of Independence, which he harkened back to in 1963, saying in the beginning founding documents say that all men are created by, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, of which are life, liberty.
Okay, so
that goes back to that. You can't do that unless you have a creator, unless there's some kind of notion of truth to deal with, not just whatever we want it to be.
And I do agree with that, but we also have to remember too that people are behind making those laws. There's some laws, like I'm a black person. 50, 60 years ago, I couldn't sit in the same counter as you.
Yeah.
I couldn't drink from the same counter as you, and those were laws based on people's truths and beliefs. So
and King would say we're obligated to disobey those laws because they violate the fundamental laws of nature given to us by our Creator.
And thank God for those people that came before us, the civil rights people, Rosa Parks, everybody, Martin Luther King, everybody, John Lewis, because otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Black
those people were Christian ministers, by the way.
Yes.
Fundamentally believes in the gospel of equality, that the blood of Jesus is at the foot of the cross. Everyone is equal. Doesn't
Yes.
matter where you're from. I loved, Dr. Polton, what Solzhenitsyn, who was in a Russian gulag for most of his adult life, argued that good and evil, the line between good and evil, is not between classes, between races, between political parties. It's between every single human heart.
Hmm.
Every one of us is capable of profound angelic good and the worst demonic evil, given the certain circumstances. And when we're humble enough to recognize that, I think real change can happen in our lives.
That's fantastic. So do you think Christianity is leading the way in terms of diversity and not just diversity, but our value of different people, and are we moving in the right direction?
I think so. I think the majority of people in the civil rights movement were deeply spiritual people who really believed in the gospel coming from Jesus. So those people reached out for that, and they were ones who were foundational for that. Also, the movement that ended slavery in Europe and moved off and stretched over into the United States, the Emancipation Proclamation, come from Lincoln, who was himself a believer. Also from the movement called I forgot to call the name of the movement that stopped slavery in England. Wilberforce was one of the ones who headed that. He was a strong believer in Christ and believer that all men, it doesn't matter the color and shape of your skin, you're made by God and to be treated with dignity. And today, if you take a look at the humanitarian organizations worldwide, the ones that are reaching out and trying to make a difference, the vast majority, 8 times out of 10 or 9 times out of 10, are held by people of faith.
Okay.
Not others.
Now, have you always been a man of faith?
No.
No. When did you what brought you here? What was there a pivotal moment, a transformative moment?
Well, I had a number of them, of course, people. One of them, when I was about 15 years old, on a bed of suicide, where I was really questioning the significance of life, the meaning of life, and the point of it all. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, all of us will be worm food. All of us will die. And I thought about that to a point where I drove my teachers crazy, I drove my parents crazy, I drove myself apparently to a point of intellectual psychosis, because I couldn't get past the grave that I will one day become a member of.
So at 15, you were grappling with the idea of what the meaning of life,
Yes.
What happened to you, or what?
Right. I wasn't depressed per se. I wasn't leaning toward a clinical area where you can call me problematic in that sense. No, I came to the conclusion intellectually, existentially, that life has no meaning ultimately if we're all dead. If this is all there is, if the atheists are right, if the materialists are correct, then nothing else exists. What's the point? Just end it now and get it over with. So picked up a knife to actually do that at that time.
So there was stuff, and there was stuff happening around you that made you believe that.
Well, it wasn't major events that happened. I was just thinking about it in my own mindset. Just reading the works of the great thinkers of the world, and reading and seeing the people in front of me. Like my uncle died; he died of cancer, and I saw him die, and it was difficult for me. And as I began to intellectually grow and mature, the reality of death hit me hard.
Yes.
Mom, are we all dying? Don't talk about that. Dad, is this going to happen to me? Let's not talk about it. You're too young to talk about that. So I'll ask my clergy, and they would avoid the questions. But some people didn't avoid the questions. The materialists, the people who believed in Freudian analysis, said that the belief in God is some kind of wish fulfillment. We believe it because we wanted to believe it, because we cannot deal with the reality of life. So I bought into that. I really thought about that. And I began to pray for the first time in my life, to ask, if God, if you're real, if there is a being out there.
Mm-hmm.
The radio in my room came on. I don't recall turning it on. I may have unconsciously. I don't know. And a man began to talk about real life, real hope, real God. And if I were to die today, would I be going up or down? Would I be going to heaven or hell? I'm not going to cease to exist. And if there is sin on my soul, I have to address that. And this is not the end for those who think they're committing suicide. If there are any of your listeners now who are contemplating that, don't. One of my colleagues at the college, her younger daughter died, and her older daughter didn't know how to deal with it. 5 years later, that 17-year-old daughter jumped off a 22-story building.
Oh, wow.
Her mother walked outside the balcony and saw her daughter's body. That is tattooed on her mind forever. If you're thinking about suicide, if you're listening, anybody, think of the implications of those who love you.
Yes.
This is not just about you. I went through that myself. And I think there's a God who loves you, and there are people who love you, and you can make it through this. Because if I can make it through it, anybody can.
I'm so happy that you're sharing that, and you're also touching on the fact that I think we have a pretty unhealthy relationship with death. It's odd, you know. I think I shared before that I lost 4 people, including my parents, in 4.5 years, and I was just, it was devastating.
Sorry.
Thank you. And you know, people show up to the funeral, they call you before, oh, I'm so sorry, you heard that, you went through that experience, and then the funeral happens, and the next day, everybody's gone, and now you're left broken on the inside, and you're feeling, okay, what's going on? And as you said, you start contemplating, hey, what is the meaning of life? What's the point of getting up and going to work when I see that my loved ones have just lost their lives unnecessarily at a time where I think they shouldn't have left? So it definitely plays with you, and if you can't talk about it and you can't get help, then you're left kind of holding the bag, and it can really, really be a burden for some people. And I know it was for me. If not for counseling, and I say it very proudly, if not for counseling, I would not be sitting here today.
Wow.
Given all that I went through, and counseling, God, and also and my husband, who picked me up literally off the floor and said, "What do you need?" I had 2 small children, and he was there, and so luckily I chose a good spouse.
That's powerful.
To help me go through this. So absolutely, I do understand, and I'm so glad that you, and I thank you for being honest and sharing that experience with you, and hopefully if one person here's this message today, or this video today, or the interview, I think you know, we've done well.
Well, you know, and I'll say that God himself says through the prophet Isaiah that though your mother and father should forget you, I will never forget you. And the God who made you has a plan for you. He has a destiny for you. The fact you're even listening to this is a clue that you can actually change your world for the better. You've gotten abilities, resources within you that are just profound. You just have to cultivate those.
Absolutely.
What God could do through you.
And nothing happens by chance. You know, I've been pretty attuned to stuff that's gone on for a pretty long time. Even like my teens, I always felt kind of weird compared to, like, while people were reading like romance novels, I was reading like psychology and all these really deep things. And I remember finishing undergrad, and I decided to go to Trinidad, my parents' hometown, home country. And so I went there for 2 weeks, and then went to Barbados to visit my girlfriends from undergrad for a week.
Okay.
And while in Trinidad, I went to a beach. Oh, let me rewind for a second. Before I left for that trip to Trinidad, a woman who I ran track and field with, her brother from Toronto had gone to the Cayman Islands for a vacation, I guess, with his friends, and actually ended up drowning in the Cayman Islands. It was, you know, it was hearing about that was really devastating. So fast forward a few weeks, I went to Trinidad and went to the beach. It's like, if you think, just imagine how crazy the beaches are, you know, when it's summertime, everyone's drinking, they're eating, and da-da-da. And I went into the water, and there were probably 60 people around me. This guy came up to me, and he goes, "How you doing?" Da-da-da-da. And he said, and I said to him, he goes, "Oh, you're gonna go further out in the water?" I said, "Me?" I said, "No way, no way." And then he said to me, he goes, "Yeah, my cousin just passed away in the Cayman Islands." And I said, "What?" And we kept talking, and it turns out that it was his cousin. So I knew the cousin in Toronto, who the woman that I knew, it was her brother who passed away, who happened to be that guy's cousin. So I left Toronto, went to Trinidad, went to a crowded beach, and this person.
And this is who you bump into. Wow.
Exactly, and shared that story. So I really believe that things are not random. You know, we're connected. There's order, and if we pay attention, we can see that we're not alone, and that there's stuff, there's messages that are telling us that, you know what, everything is okay and things are working out, and our steps are being guided. I really
absolutely right. And while you said that, there are so many profound connections in our own lives that are just around us. We just don't see them all.
Yes.
We just don't see them all. John Piper, a great theologian, recently said that God is constantly working in our lives on a daily basis. We may only see 3 out of the 100,000 events, and he's putting together, orchestrating for us on a daily basis. Sometimes the thing that happened to you on the beach is just boom, right in your face. You can see that. And a lot of events happen to me, similar. What's this? How is this happening? Is this a chance coincidences? No, not if there's a God who loves me and cares for me and is putting together the world like a massive chessboard. There are things that are troubling for me. There are things that bring me to tears, but there are also wondrous heights of glory and ecstasy. And all that by chance, I don't buy it. The very DNA molecule is one of the most complex DNA maps in the universe. It not only gives you the detailed, intricate design of each and every living species on the planet, but it also has a program that puts it all together when it's in the right environment, in the womb of the parent, whether it's a mammal, an insect, or a human. And that profound, detailed speck of mathematical equations that are put together just in the DNA molecule alone are evidence of design that's profound. And to ignore it is the height of naivety. To ignore that there's some kind of evidence there for some kind of intelligence. Whether you're looking at the animal kingdom, the wonderful birds of a hummingbird, the wings of a hummingbird, or you're looking at the events that happen in our lives, tragic or ecstatic. There are feats that God is using to draw us to himself. We just have to open our eyes to them.
And I love the fact that we're talking about the positives and knowing that that there is an entity that's assisting us. And that said, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen?
That is a $10 million question, right? Anybody who can answer that question is just more than just a Nobel Prize for that one. We need to, as the question is asked, and you mentioned talking about people's perspectives. Sometimes I find myself as a philosopher, as a thinker, as a theologian in areas in philosophy. I want to give a logical, rational reason to people. But I sometimes have, in my experience, I've had to realize I'm talking to a person here who may have lost a loved one, who's going through, the pain is raw. The wound is raw. And some answers don't come through propositions. They come through a touch. They come through someone holding them. So the question itself is, you're not just addressing a theoretical issue, you're addressing a practical issue that has fingers and it has blood sometimes all over it. Whether you're talking about the massive shootings that are happening across the United States, or the explosions happening in the Middle East and Turkey, the suicide bombs that have made the country just go back into itself, and security checks are becoming prominent, limiting people's freedom across the board. Whether you're talking about that or on an individual level, you're suffering. It's a profound question. First, we need to ask, what on earth do we mean by evil? What do we mean by that? Because evil itself cannot, let me say this as clear as I can, it cannot exist unless you have some kind of semblance or understanding of an objective good. If evil is just whatever people want it to be, if it's all just opinion, then it's just your opinion that it's bad. Deal with it, as Sigmund Freud said. It's the survival of the fittest, as Darwin said. Okay. The strong survive, the weak die. So just go. No, but it is wrong for rape. It is wrong to have genocide across places of Yugoslavia and others. But why is it wrong? Unless you have a standard that calls things wrong, then you can't have one. And it goes something to this, if I may just wrap this fire up and you can jump into it. Evil, by definition, is a deviation from the way things ought to be. If I could put it as succinct as possible. But you can't have a way things ought to be unless there is a way things ought to be. And you can't have a way things ought to be unless there was an intelligent mind that put it that way. If it's all blind chance, then it's survival of the fittest. The strong overcome the weak, and that's just how we have to deal with it. But we don't have to deal with that, do we? Martin Luther King was right. If you do not have something worth dying for, then you don't have something worth living for. And whatever that is, it has to be something greater than yourself.
I love that. And I agree with what you're saying. I do. I admittedly, I wrestle with that question all the time, because I look at people who are doing amazing things here on earth, and then their lives are just taken. And then you've got people who are killing people and just practicing evil, literally, and their lives are being spared. And there's and I guess I guess you can't make sense of it. I guess once we leave here, then maybe we'll get the answers later on or at some point. But it actually is. It can be really frustrating when you really try to make sense of things, because it's nonsensical a lot of the times.
It is. It's very difficult. Let me give you an example. So I take my son to the doctor, little Daniel Zacharias. He was 3 at the time. My wife and I were with him. And he's questioning, why is this doctor holding me down? And why is he putting this sharp, painful needle in my body, causing me pain? And you're my father, and you're letting it happen.
Huh.
And he's looking at me with tears running down his cheeks.
Oh.
And how am I going to explain to him that the neurological aspect part of your brain needs to fight the diseases that are going to be spreading around culture, and you need to have this immunization given to you by a small part of that virus. It's going to stop these viruses from coming in because you'll develop a strong immunity to it, giving your white blood cells a stronger count to be able to address that on a deep physiological level. Mm-hmm. He's going to look at me and say, what?
What are you talking about?
All I have to do is hold his hand and say, with tears, trust me.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm going through pain, when you're going through suffering, when the world around you is hell, Christ reaches his hand out and says, trust me. Mm-hmm. I know what I'm doing. And you know what's profound, Dr. Poulton? Not just that he says, trust me, but he proved it. If I look closer at the hand that's reaching to me, I see nail marks. And no other God has that. All the other gods, whether you're talking about Buddha, who's not a god, by the way, he doesn't even claim to be, he's actually more atheistic. Mm-hmm. He's sitting serene, and he actually denies that there's such a thing as real evil, if you really read Buddhism. He's not Allah from Islam who sits on his throne waiting for us to come to him. He gets off his throne, walks into earth, gets beaten and bloodied, and says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Mm-hmm. That is the God I'm believing in. And so what sets him apart is not only that he suffered like we did, but he also walked into our suffering and says, trust me, I know what I'm doing. And there's evidence for him in his death and resurrection more than anybody else in history. I'm not downgrading the other religions and faiths. We can believe them. This is a culture that opens the door for that. But it's only that way because there's Christians who are in the positions of power that allow that. If you go to East Asian countries and Muslim countries, they do not allow it. They don't. If I were to walk down the streets of Saudi Arabia and denounce Muhammad, I would be denouncing my head.
Yes. Good luck with that.
The only reason I have for religious freedom in this country is because Christians put that into play earlier. And sadly, many of us Christians don't even follow that. But we try to. That is the goal. Well, I may have gotten off topic here, but
no, it's completely on topic, and you are expressing your faith. You are a man of faith, and whether you call yourself Christian or not or whatever, I look at the heart, and I can see that you have a good heart. You've got good intentions, and I've really enjoyed this conversation.
It was an honor. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. But before I go, though, I'd like to actually ask my guests a question about their biggest diversity moment. Can you share an example? It could be related to religion, or you shared about your students with race and them sharing experiences of discrimination. Is there a pivotal time or a moment that happened with you when you just understood more about diversity?
Yes. Because I'm more lighter skinned than some of my Middle Eastern colleagues, I don't experience some of the overt racism around me, the others, or if I do, it's different. But one particular period, I was finishing up my doctoral work in England. It was right after 9/11 hit, where the 19 terrorists of Saudi Arabians, Arabs, Muslims.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So people were really looking closely at Arabs in the country and around the world. So, Britain was really on the car. The tech levels were very high, watching specifically for anybody of that background. Mm-hmm. And I had grown my beard out so much. It was like this. I said, I'm not cutting it till I finish this thesis. My fiance at the time didn't like it. I gotta finish it. It's my motivation.
Yes.
So I walked into the airport, and then quickly red flags are going off. I'm from Jordan. I'm born in Jordan. I have this big beard. Mm-hmm. I probably am a Muslim because of that, and I may be a terrorist, right?
Yep.
No, he more than likely. So I was asked to come out of the line.
Mm-hmm.
It was in London, and I was checked. My stuff was going. So what's the deal? I didn't do anything. I'm not even on your watch list. No, we just random check. I said, yeah, really, random. Sure it is. But that was a moment that dawned on me. Look, this is what's happening around the world. I have to see. Look, I have to deal with the fact that people are afraid. They're xenophobic, and I have to address that on a personal level. Even though I'm not buy into that ideology, I fit into that people group, that stereotype to buy into it. And sadly, there are people within my stereotype, within my people group, who fill that stereotype very well. And of course, they're on the cover of CNN, right? So we make everybody else who's not in it look bad. So that was a moment for me that woke me up regarding some of the struggles people face with discrimination and diversity in a culture that's predominantly the other.
Well, thank you for sharing that experience. And I think the lesson is that we need to always be cognizant that we're not lumping people into one box based upon how they look. There's diversity even within diverse groups.
Of course.
So I appreciate your time today. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Again, thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Sweis. And where can people find you?
The website is logicallyfaithful.com, where I have a myriad of different resources about 10 things science cannot do. It's a free book that I put together.
Nice.
It's called Blind Spots of Science. You just get that for free just by going on the website and clicking on that.
Okay.
There's a lot of good resources there, so I recommend you go there, especially if you're going through a difficult time.
Awesome. So logicallyfaithful.com, and someone can reach out to you as well at that site.
Of course, yes. Definitely.
Okay, wonderful. I so appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on my show today.
Thank you. It was an honor.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.